And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. Well, good evening. Thank you all for coming out. I just so love that worship. So I thank Jessica and Annika and Trevor and Jed. Had to ask Jed his name. Thank you so much for that worship. It's always so good to be able to sing of the glory of our Lord. Well, thanks. Back to Daniel. Last week I asked you to remember a phrase, and I don't really expect you to remember it because I wouldn't have remembered it. But one phrase to think about as we went through Daniel's devotion last week, and that was, be true to your relationship with God first and foremost. That really should be a guiding principle of our lives, right? So tonight I'm going to ask you to think about this phrase, but it's going to be a little more difficult because, well, maybe not, because you're all really smart people. And you've heard me talk a couple times now, so you're probably starting to understand my I can't talk. So you're understanding my inability to talk and how I phrase things. But this week, as we go through this section in Daniel chapter 2, verses 1 through 23, I want you to think about this, that faith is the ability to access the reality of who God is. Faith is the ability to access the reality of who God is. Sorry, I didn't get it in my notes, so it's not up there. One more time if you're taking notes. Faith is the ability to access the reality of who God is. And I think we'll see that played out in the lives of Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah through this section. So will you pray with me? Lord, we realize that you are the one who even gives us the gift of faith. And God, we want to have that ability, Lord, to access the reality of who you are in our lives daily, moment by moment. Of understanding, Lord, that so fits in with the second theme of Daniel, that it's those people who know you, God. It's those people who have a relationship with you, who walk with you, who will display strength and take action. And that's what we want to be, God, not because we want to be great people, but, Lord, because we want to be faithful people, because you deserve our faithfulness, because you deserve the glory. Lord, you have redeemed us. First you created us, Lord. We rebelled against you, and you, Lord, in your tremendous mercy, because of your great love with which you loved us, implemented a plan of redemption in which you, Jesus, came and took our place on the cross. We have so much to be thankful for. So much to be thankful for. And we are, Lord. I know most of the people, we are thankful for what you've done for us, Jesus. And we just want to live lives that are pleasing to you. And we know we need your help to do that. So we ask that you would help us to continue to pursue you daily and grow in our relationship with you, that we would be able to access the reality of who you are in our lives, God, that you would be glorified in and through our lives. And we ask this in Jesus' name, amen. Well, last week we looked at some of the circumstances surrounding Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah's transportation to Babylon. And we talked about the three different captivities, the three different sieges. We talked about the first one that Daniel and his friends went in, happened in 605 BC. That a second one happened in 597 BC when Ezekiel went and about 10,000 other people. And then the final captivity took place in 586 BC, where the temple and the city was destroyed. And I told you from my viewpoint, and I mean, you can disagree with me, but it seemed to me that there was a reason why God wanted that first deportation to be small. He wanted these guys to get settled. He had a purpose for them in Babylon, and he wanted to make sure that got taken care of. I'm not saying that God necessarily saw to it that Nebuchadnezzar died, but he did use those circumstances, and Nebuchadnezzar had to get back to Babylon, so he didn't finish his siege. It was a smaller siege. It said he only took some of the vessels from the temple, and he only took some of the royal families and some of the nobility with him back to Babylon. And my personal thinking as I've gone through the book is that there's a purpose for these four guys. God has a special purpose for them related to Babylon, and even more so, it's actually related to the kings the kings of Babylon and then Medo-Persia. He was going to use these 4 young men, who later became old men, in the lives of these kings. You know. And if one sense, I mean, you could say that Ezekiel, while he was in exile, he functioned as a prophet to the exiles. But these guys, they functioned, if you'll accept my verbiage out of context, they were kind of like tent-making missionaries in Babylon. They had jobs. But they were being placed in jobs, but God was using them to reach primarily the kings of Babylon. That's what he was doing with their lives. And, you know, as I was thinking about this, and I always hesitate to share things in this way, but I'm going to share it anyway. When I first started praying about doing Daniel, I got this impression that some of you younger people in here, God is going to use you. You're going to find yourself in places of influence, places of power, places of prestige, where God can use you. And the question is, will you be ready? Will you have prepared your hearts? Will you be at a place that they were at, where you have resolved not to be defiled by the things of this world, not to give in? You know, and it doesn't even have to be in a place where you think it's a position of power. Wherever you're at, God has the ability to use you. But will you have purpose that you're going to be used, no matter what comes your way? If your job's on the line, can you trust God to keep your job? And if not, can you trust him to get you another one? You know, it's just, that's kind of where the world is at today. And I would just encourage you to be like Daniel, to be like Hananiah, to be like Mishael and Azariah, to purpose in your heart not to be defiled by this world, but to stand true. Because they did that, because they purposed in their heart, because they did stand true, God honored them. And God actually enabled them to have the functions that they have. Remember that? We saw from last week, verse 17, that God caused them to have knowledge and intelligence and all wisdom and literature from Babylon. God caused them to be increased in their understanding, to even surpass all of the other people in their Babylon University class. Thank you. I got one little giggle. Thank you. Okay, one of the most important things I think we can see from Daniel is that God can and does work in our lives to accomplish his glory in and through us. You know, and as we go through this section, what we're seeing so far and what we're going to continue to see is that God is sovereign and he accomplishes purposes, but he does expect us to respond appropriately. He expects us to make decisions. He expects us to choose to follow him. He expects us to trust him and be obedient. That's how it kind of works together. We do have a part to play. I think most of you are smart enough to know that. It's taken me a long time in my Christian walk to realize that what I choose to do actually matters. It's actually significant to God. It actually plays a part in how much God is able to work through my life. And I think it's the same for all of you. See, God put these 4 in a position that they were going to able to accomplish his purposes through them. The thing is this, the position he put them in was really difficult. It wasn't an easy thing, right? We might look at it from the outside and go, well, you know, they got elevated and promoted to positions of power, so probably look pretty good from the outside. But they weren't complete. They were always in opposition. There was always hostility towards them. And as we go through the book of Daniel, we'll see that. People were constantly trying to set them up, constantly trying to get them killed, constantly trying to get them demoted, put them in a bad light with the king. So even though it looks like from the outside they had it pretty good, they had this nice position of this influence as being administrators within the kingdom of Babylon, it was still very difficult for them. And this is the thing of it. Oftentimes when we find ourselves in a very hard and difficult situation, I don't know how you guys are, but oftentimes I kind of immediately think that I did something wrong. If my life circumstances, if I'm in a season of real difficulty and nothing seems to be going the way I want it to go, I kind of feel like I did something wrong, that God's not happy with me. You guys ever feel like that? See, I imagine they could have felt like that, but that wasn't the case at all with these guys. Remember, I mentioned it briefly last week. In actuality, they weren't doing any of the stuff for which Judah and Jerusalem came under captivity. They weren't guilty of any of that. So they could probably have said, you know, like, why am I in this most difficult position? And I think they realized that God had a purpose for them. God was going to use them in this very difficult situation because he was refining their lives and he was going to work through their lives. Sometimes that difficult situation we find ourselves in is the very place we need to be for God to do what he wants to do for us for eternity. I got to steal this expression from somebody, and I don't know her name, and I think the guy's name was Andrew Brunson. I don't know if you guys have heard of Andrew Brunson. He was a missionary in Turkey who ended up going to prison. He was convicted of being a terrorist and a spy. And anyway, his mom had visited him one day when he was doing bad, and she said to him, Andrew, you need to look at this with God's eyes. God has eternal eyes. I love that expression. God has eternal eyes. See, if you think about our existence, we do have a point in time when we were created, when we came into existence. But if you were to put our existence here on this earth now, like on a timeline, we came into being, but we will exist now forever. So if you put this time we're in right now on that line, it would be like this little teeny speck over here. But oftentimes we feel like this life is everything, don't we? We feel like this is the most important part of our life. But see, God is looking at the eternal perspective. He has eternal eyes. And there are things that he's doing in our life in this physical realm that we're in now that are going to be shaping us for eternity. Can't give you, I don't know what that all means, but I see that picture in the Word of God. We're going to reign and rule with Jesus during his 1,000-year kingdom. He's preparing us for that. There's other things he probably has in mind. He's infinite. His creativity is limitless. So he's got things planned for us throughout all eternity. And so what I want to make sure I do is I don't let the difficulties I'm going through now keep me from trusting him and allowing him to do what he wants to do in my life. My tendency is always to try to get out of the difficulty. Oh, this can't be from God. My life's supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be blessed. It's supposed to be filled with joy and happiness and a merry-go-round. But life, that's not life. Not life for someone who's actually truly seeking to serve the Lord. There's difficulties, and he uses those difficulties to refine us, to shape us, to transform us. And the fact that you might be in a difficult situation, it might be the very evidence of God's favor on your life. Do you ever think about that? Might be the very thing that he's demonstrating that he can trust you. He's allowed you to go into a difficult situation because he knows that you will remain faithful and obedient to him in the whole process. And this is really where these guys are at. God knew he could trust them. And so he put them in this very difficult situation because he's going to use them to affect the lives of these kings. And these next 3 chapters we're going to go through, chapters 2 through 4. It's really easy to get caught up into the big details of these chapters. Like in this one is where we're going to get that first image of this giant statue. It's going to give us the flow of human empires, human history, as they relate to Israel, even all the way through until the end. And so that image, we can get that statue in our minds and we can focus on that. In the next chapter, we're going to see Nebuchadnezzar makes his own statue to himself, this huge giant statue, and he commands everybody to bow down and worship, and Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah won't do it, and so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego they become and go into the furnace. We could look at that. We could look at the giant tree in the 4th chapter and get this big, huge tree that gets cut down. And we can look at these big events. But let me suggest to you that these next 3 chapters, 2, 3, and 4, they're all about one thing. They're all about the evangelization of a king. This is how God reaches a king who nobody else can reach. Do you guys all have difficult people in your life that nobody can reach? God knows how to reach difficult people. And when we look at Nebuchadnezzar, when we look at this individual, and we look at how God moved in his life, it should give us encouragement that those people we think are unreachable, that God can't touch, God can touch, God can reach. And one of the fascinating things with Nebuchadnezzar, this took like between 40 to 45 years to accomplish. Sometimes you think it's been a long while, you've been waiting long. 40 to 45 years. I don't know if we have that much time left, so pray really hard for your friends and loved ones. We'll see. Anyway, so chapters 2 through 4, this is the thing with Nebuchadnezzar. He keeps going back and forth. God gets his attention. He kind of responds. He goes back into his world of pride, world of thinking that he's somebody special. And then God has to take him through another whole process. Sorry, I lost myself. Thank you that you're so patient with me. And God will do this for him for the next 45 years. So this is what we're going to look at tonight. We're going to look at the first movement of God in Nebuchadnezzar's life, and that is this dream. At least it's the first movement as recorded in the book of Daniel. And so we're going to look at, right now, chapter 2, verses 1 through 6. This is what it says. Now in the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams, and his spirit was troubled, and sleep left him. Then the king gave orders to call the magicians, the conjurers, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans to tell the king his dreams. So they came in and stood before the king. The king said to them, I had a dream, and my spirit is anxious to understand the dream. Then the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic, O king, live forever. Tell the dream to your servants, and we will declare the interpretation. And the king replied to the Chaldeans, the command from me is firm. If you do not make known to me the dream and its interpretation, you will be torn limb from limb, and your houses will be made a rubbish heap. Nice guy, right? Your house will be made a rubbish heap. But he's fair. If you declare to me the dream, then you'll receive from me gifts and a reward and great honor. Therefore, declare to me the dream and its interpretation. It says that Nebuchadnezzar had dreams, and my picture of this, commentators are different on how they view this. I just think he's having this recurring dream night after night. It's the same dream, it's over and over, and it finally gets to the point he just can't sleep, and he's had enough. So he calls in these people to communicate to him and give him an answer. Now, I think Nebuchadnezzar got the idea that this dream wasn't just normal, that this dream was coming from an outside source. Nebuchadnezzar did have a spiritual mindset. It just was the wrong spirits. But he did have this viewpoint of spiritual beings, and I think he kind of got the impression that this dream I'm getting, it's coming from the gods. And why do I say that? Well, there's a stone tablet in the British Museum with a statement by Nebuchadnezzar. And this is what it says. It says, I am Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, the exalted prince, the favorite of the god Marduk, the beloved of the god Nebu, the arbiter, the possessor of wisdom, who reverences their lordship, the untiring governor who is constantly anxious for the maintenance of the shrines of Babylon and Borsippa, the wise, the pious, the son of Nabopolassar, king of Babylon. To Marduk, my lord, I make supplication, O eternal prince, lord of all being. Guide in a straight path the king whom thou lovest, and whose name thou hast proclaimed as was pleasing to thee. I am the prince, the favorite, the creature of thy hand. Thou hast created me and entrusted me with dominion over all the people. You know, the fascinating thing that God is going to show him exactly that who actually did create him and who gave him dominion. That's what all these experiences he's going to go through. It's almost like God, okay, Nebuchadnezzar, you want to make that statement? I challenge you on it, and I'm going to show you who the true God is and who actually puts you in dominion over all the world. You know, he got it wrong, and so these next 40 to 45 years, God is going to straighten him out. He understands, though, that this dream is significant, and so he wants an answer, so he calls in all of his specialists, all of the people, the wise men, the magicians, the conjurers, sorcerers, the Chaldeans. You know, these are the people who are supposed to be in touch with the spirit world. These are the people who are supposed to be able to communicate with the gods as they know them. So they should be able to give him an answer, right? This dream is coming from the gods. So these specialists of mine who are skilled in all of these dark arts, they should be able to tell me what's happening. And so when they come in, he tells them what it is that he wants from them. And I think at this point, they probably breathed a sigh of relief. Because when he called them in this urgent meeting, they probably were thinking, oh no, this guy likes to tear people from limb to limb. I wonder what he wants from us. And when they said to him, you know, I had a dream and I want you to interpret it, and they probably, we do this all the time. This isn't any big deal. We can tell you your dream. You know, in fact, they found there's like 110 tablets of how to interpret dreams that they found from Babylon. So they had this whole empirical method of doing it also. They categorized the dreams, the different aspects of the dreams, and they concluded what they meant. So they're probably thinking, oh yeah, man, no big deal, king. We can tell you your dream. You know, we can tell you the interpretation. Just tell us the dream, and we'll declare the interpretation to you. But the monarch, Nebuchadnezzar, and you realize he was a monarch, right? Nebuchadnezzar didn't have to answer to anybody. Nebuchadnezzar could do whatever he wanted to do, different than what we're going to see with the Medo-Persians. He was an absolute monarch. There was nobody to challenge him. But this is what the monarch Nebuchadnezzar tells all of his specialists, all of his spiritual advisors. There's a new rule in this game. Not so fast, wise men. Things are going to be a little different. We're going to play this game differently, and I'm going to find out just how good you are and whether or not you should be on my payroll or whether I need to eliminate all of your jobs. I called you all in. You have all these special skills. You should be able to meet my demand. So this is my demand, and it's firm. And I'll just say this really quickly. Some people think Nebuchadnezzar forgot the dream because you can translate that phrase, the word is gone from me. But that most commentators and most of your English translations will say the command is firm. That's another way to translate it, and that's, I think, is the truth. I don't think he forgot the dream at all. It was a reoccurring dream. He kept having it. I think he knew the dream. But what he's saying to them, I made a command. This command isn't going to be changed, and you need to meet my demands. And this is my demand. You make known to me the dream and its interpretation, or you're going to be torn limb from limb. Then again, he was fair. He offered them a blessing if they could tell it to him. I think right at this point, the wise men are starting to experience some concern. And maybe even a little bit of fear. And so this is their response to him. They answered a second time and said, let the king tell the dream to his servants, and we will declare the interpretation. The king replied, I know for certain that you are bargaining for time, which actually means you're trying to buy time. I think it's where we get that phrase from. You're bargaining for time, and as much as you think, and as much as you have seen that the command for me is firm, that if you do not make the dream known to me, there is only one decree for you have agreed together to speak lying and corrupt words before me until the situation is changed. Therefore, tell me the dream, that I may know that you can declare to me its interpretation. The Chaldeans answered the king and said, there is no man on earth who could declare the matter for the king. And as much as no great king or ruler has ever asked anything like this, or of any magician, conjurer, or Chaldean. Moreover, the thing which the king demands is difficult, I'll say, and there is no one else who could declare it to the king except God's, whose dwelling place is not with mortal flesh. Because of this, the king became indignant and very furious and gave orders to destroy all the wise men in Babylon. I think they pretended well, let's just pretend like we didn't hear him the first time. Okay, well, we'll ask him again. Okay, tell us the dream and we'll give you the interpretation. We can work this out, king. No big deal, right? Or maybe they're thinking, well, he's just being unreasonable because he hasn't gotten a lot of sleep. He's just kind of cranky. So they request one more time for the king to tell him the dream, and he's had enough. He's not too happy with these guys. They're just buying time. He's sick of this whole ordeal. And this is the thing. See, I think they were thinking that if they could just stall him long enough, hopefully this whole dream thing, which has become a nightmare to them, would just go away. But it's not going to happen. And this is the other thing. It's probably, Nebuchadnezzar's been king about 3 years. These are the older wise men, probably worked under his dad. And maybe he watched them interact with his dad and kind of come up to the conclusion that I don't know that these guys are legitimate. I don't really know if they really know what they're doing. So I'm going to give them a test to see, do you really know what you're doing? Can you really be trusted? Do you really have contact with the gods? He basically accuses them of being fake. He goes, I know what your plans are. You're going to make up an interpretation. You're all going to agree on it and act like this is coming from the gods. So I can't trust you. They finally realize that they're in big trouble, and so they try to mount this threefold defense. They tell him there isn't a man alive who could do what the king is demanding. Now, I know what you're all thinking, right? You're all thinking, well, there is. But in reality, even Daniel can't do this, right? And that's what Daniel's going to say when he has his opportunity. No, king, I can't tell you what your dream is, but there is a true God in heaven who can. Their second line of defense, I'm not sure was so smart. They said to him, no great king or ruler has ever demanded such a thing like this. So what is that? What are they saying? You're not a great king? Because he did demand it. I'm thinking, you should have rethought how you phrase that. Or they're saying, be a great king and don't do it. It's too late. He's already made the demands. And so they come up with this idea that only the gods can do this. And gods don't dwell with mortal flesh. When you hear that, does that make you think of something? The minute I read that, I automatically thought of John 1:14, right? Which says this, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. The gods don't dwell with mortal flesh, but the true God does. The true God not only does that, he took on flesh and dwelt among us, and we saw his glory. Glory is of the only begotten from the Father, full of grace and truth. And what's even more, Jesus not only took on flesh, but even when he was leaving, he said this to his disciples in John 14:23. Jesus answered and said to them, if anyone loves me, he will keep my word, and my Father will love him, and we will come to him and make our abode with him. See, God will dwell with flesh. God will involve himself in our lives. And then again in John 14:16-17, he said, I will ask the Father, and he will give you another helper, that he may be with you forever. That is the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive because it does not see him or know him. But you know him because he abides with you, and he will be in you. Isn't that kind of fascinating? Because if you put those together, it just means the full Trinity is with us, always. If we keep his commandments, if we surrender our life to him, we have the full Godhead abiding with us. But not only that, not only is God with us, God is accessible to us. Unlike their gods who were not accessible, who were capricious, who they had to do all these crazy things to get him to respond, our God is not like that. And it made me think of Matthew 7, where it said, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be opened. Or what man is there among you who, when his son asks for a loaf, will not give him a stone? Will give him a stone, sorry. Or if he asks for a fish, he will not give him a snake, will he? If you then, being evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give what is good to those who ask him? Daniel knew this. See, Daniel's God wasn't like the gods of the Babylonians. He knew he had a God who was merciful, who was gracious, who would respond to his request. And that's why we'll see his response is going to be so much different to Nebuchadnezzar. And it just made me think again of the underlying theme of this whole book is that the people who know their God, they'll display strength and take action. The people that know their God, if we really understand who God is, if we understand that he's abiding with us, if we understand the Holy Spirit's in us, if we understand God's goodness towards us, if we understand he's asking us to come to him and bring our requests to him, that'll give us strength. The ability to stand up in difficult times, and we'll take the appropriate action because we're doing it for our God. We're not doing it for us. Well, that was enough. Their response to the king, their threefold defense didn't work very well. He's had enough, and so he orders that everybody, all the wise men in Babylon, get destroyed. So picking it up in verse 13, we read this. So the decree went forth that the wise men should be slain, and they looked for Daniel and his friends to kill them. Daniel replied with discretion and discernment to Arioch, the captain of the king's bodyguard, who had gone forth to slay the wise men of Babylon. He said to Arioch, the king's commander, for what reason is the decree from the king so urgent? Then Arioch informed Daniel about the matter. So Daniel went in and requested of the king that he would give him time in order that he might declare the interpretation to the king. Then Daniel went to his house and informed his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, about the matter, so that they might request compassion from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that Daniel and his friends would not be destroyed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. I don't know, man. I don't know about you, but even if just the police came knocking at my door at night, I'd probably be a little disturbed, probably be a little shaken. This is the commander. He's either the commander of the king's bodyguard or he's the commander of the executioners. The word can be translated either way. And he's got a group of people with him. So imagine when Daniel opened the door or pulled back the curtain or whatever he did, whatever his accommodations were, and saw this individual there, you would think there would be fear, anxiety. He would be troubled. But instead, he had this great composure. And he asked the head of the commander of the bodyguard, he asked him quietly and politely. That's basically what it means with discretion and discernment. Quietly and politely, what's up? Why the big hurry? Why is the punishment so severe? You would think that Daniel's probably thinking, is there some coup? Are the people trying to overthrow Nebuchadnezzar? What's going on? When he heard what the problem was, he probably went, couldn't answer his dream, huh? So we're all dying. All right, I get it. That's pretty serious. Anyway, he informs them, and somehow, commentators are debating over this, but it appears he actually got access to the king. And because who's going to stop the, all of the limbs being torn from torn? All the limbs being torn, limb from limb. There's only one person who can do that, Nebuchadnezzar. So somehow he must have gotten access, and the king actually grants him this. And think, why did he grant Daniel this when he didn't grant the other ones? Well, it hasn't been too long since he graduated from Babylon University, right? And remember when he graduated, Nebuchadnezzar looked at these four and said, these four are 10 times better than everybody in my whole realm. He was extremely impressed with them. Now he's looking at him here, and he's probably intrigued. Look at this. Daniel is probably at the most 18 now. He could be 20, but probably he's about 18 years old. And he's standing before this great mighty king, and he's saying, hey, just give me time and I'll tell you. And the king's probably thinking, wow, interesting. This guy's got this much confidence, this much boldness to come before me. And maybe he was actually even a little bit hopeful because of how much Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah had oppressed him previously. Maybe he's a little hopeful. Maybe these guys can tell me my dream. So he grants him his favor. And so Daniel immediately goes to his house, and he informs his friends. I don't know where they were when the commander showed up at the door, but apparently they weren't there. So Daniel goes back, and he tells them what's going on. And in order that they might request compassion from the God of heaven concerning this mystery. Now, I don't think that's a mystery to any, or a surprise to any of us, that what they decide to do is have a prayer meeting. I don't know. Are you guys like that? I'll be honest with you. Usually, sometimes when disaster has struck in our lives, it wasn't necessarily my first inclination to go to prayer, and other times it was. But this is the reality. Daniel realizes that the only way they're going to get through this is through God's help. And again, I think once again, it's just this tribute to Daniel and his prayer life. He knew how to connect with God. And as I've been going through this, it's been a real challenge for me. Been asking myself constantly, almost daily now. It's like, can I say I actually experience the same kind of confidence in prayer, the same kind of closeness, the same kind of awareness with God's presence with me? And sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. But I have determined by looking at Daniel that I want to do that before my life is over. I want to commit time every day to be in my God's presence, to be in my Father's presence. There's really nothing else more important than that. And there's nothing that's going to give us the strength that we need to walk through this life, to face the challenges that we face and what may be coming down the road. It's our relationship with God. It's our personal relationship. It's just not knowing about him, but it's knowing him. And this is the thing. We've looked at even those other passages. God, he actually wants to know us. Don't you find that fascinating? That God wants to spend time with you. And he's big enough to control all the billions of people in the world and all that's going on in the world and still be intimate with you. See, to think that God can't be intimate with you because there's this major crisis going on in the Middle East, it's really diminished who God is. God's not that small. God is big enough to be intimate with every one of us while he's dealing with all of the catastrophes that are going on in the world. He's got a plan, he's got it all in order, and he wants to be with us. See, but Daniel knew that. Daniel knew how to come into the presence of God. Because faith, right, is what? Faith is the ability to access the reality of who God is. And Daniel knew he was going to be able to access what he needed from God because he knew who God was. He's experienced this. It'll tell us later on as we get through the book that Daniel had a habit. 3 times a day he prayed. 3 times a day he faced Jerusalem and prayed, which was also something that they were told to do in the book of Acts, which is fascinating, right? Way back, not Acts. You're going, what? 1 Kings 8, they were actually told, when you get taken into captivity, face towards Jerusalem and pray. Pray for your deliverance. So 3 times a day, Daniel would face towards Jerusalem and pray. See, prayer was very important to Daniel, very much a part of his life. He knew how to access the presence of God in prayer. And I'm kind of thinking to myself, when he did go to pray, they said they were going to ask for God's compassion or for his mercy. And I'm kind of thinking they also probably threw something like this in there. Well, God, you brought us to Babylon. You obviously have this special purpose for us. We've only been here like 3 years. I don't think we've accomplished that purpose yet. Do you want us to die? Up to you. Are you done with us or you're not done with us? Because if you're not done with the purpose you have for us here in Babylon, then we really need some help. We need for you to tell us what the dream was and give us the interpretation. Tell us the dream and give us the interpretation. We're going to be torn limb from limb. And I don't think they really said it like that. I think they were probably more respectful, but God gets me. He understands my sense of humor. Even if you don't, because not any of you laughed. But, I think there was probably that part of that was in there. It's like, hey, you want us to carry out this mission, you're going to have to come through for us. And they knew God would. God has already come through for them once, right? When they refused to be defiled by the food, God honored them and blessed them and gave them supernatural abilities to be the highest in their class. And so now they're looking to God again. God, we need for you to tell us what this is, or it's curtains for us. Verse 19, then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a night vision. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven, and Daniel said, let the name of God be blessed forever and ever, for wisdom and power belong to him. It is he who changes the times and epochs. He removes kings and establishes kings. He gives wisdom to wise men and knowledge to men of understanding. It is he who reveals the profound hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him. To you, O God of my fathers, I give thanks and praise, for you have given me wisdom and power. Even now you have made known to me what we requested of you, for you have made known to us the king's matter. And obviously you all caught that, right? You caught what just happened? God gave Daniel the answer he needed. So what did Daniel do? Immediately run to Nebuchadnezzar? No. Daniel stopped and praised God. He stopped and gave God praise. He stopped and reflected on who God was and thanked him. See, this is what I'm saying. Daniel knew his God. And that's why he was able to display strength and take action. He takes time to offer praise. And this is what Daniel acknowledges. It's interesting, like I mentioned a few times that Daniel knew the scriptures, and a lot of the commentators will point out a lot of these phrases come from various Psalms. So apparently Daniel was very well versed in the Psalms. And so he's reiterating some of them. But this is what Daniel acknowledged about God. He acknowledged that God is eternal. He's uncreated and therefore the creator of all things. And he does that by saying, let the name of God be blessed forever and ever. And you go, well, how did you get that out of there? Well, one of the commentators I read said that one of the better ways of translating that would be this. Let the name of God be blessed from one end of eternity to the other. Throughout all of eternity, because God exists throughout all of eternity. And so his name shall be blessed throughout all of eternity, and it will be. So Daniel acknowledges that. God, you alone are the creator. Every other person in this world has been created. Every other spiritual being has been created. You're the only uncreated being. You are the creator of all things, and to you should go all honor. Let your name be blessed forever and ever. This is what else he said about God. God knows the best way to do everything, and he has the ability to actually get it done. God knows the best way to do everything. He's all wise, and he has the ability to get it done. He's all powerful. For wisdom and power belong to him, Daniel says. Then Daniel will let us know that God controls the course of nature and humanity. He said, you set the times and the seasons. You have established those. You remove kings and you establish kings. You give wisdom to wise men and knowledge to men of understanding. God controls the course of nature and humanity. See, for me, many times I would study this stuff and I go, yeah, that sounds good. I need to memorize that. I need to be able to recite that. But this isn't Daniel just reciting something. This is something Daniel grasped about the reality of God. See, because faith is the ability to access the reality of who God is. And I think Daniel actually understood this. This is actually who God is. I can trust him. I can believe in him. He's going to move on my behalf. He actually intervenes in the life of human beings. And then he also acknowledges that God is omniscient. He's all-knowing. He says, it is he who reveals the profound and hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him. There's nothing hidden from God. God knows everything. He knows everything about us. And then ultimately he ends by giving thanks and praise, because God has given him both the understanding and the ability to carry out the task before him. Saying, to you, O God of my fathers, I give thanks and praise, for you have given me wisdom and power. All wisdom and power, no. But enough wisdom and power, yes. Daniel knows the best way to handle this situation, and he's got the capability because he's being strengthened by God to do it. And he understands that it's God who is doing that through him. It's God who's given him this wisdom and power, because he's made known to him what they requested. He's made known to him the dream. He knows the dream. Can you imagine how exciting that must have been? It's like, yeah, I see it. I see the dream. Yeah, that's the dream. I get it. That's the interpretation. And as we're going to see next week, God even gave him more than that, because God even gave him the understanding of why Nebuchadnezzar was even having the dream, which is fascinating. He gave him more than he asked for. Is our God like that or not? He definitely is like that. He always gives us more than we ask for. He's able to do above and beyond, abundantly above and beyond, right? So this is the thing with Daniel. Daniel was able to react this way because he had faith. He had the ability to access the reality of who God is. See, Daniel had the kind of faith, because Daniel had that kind of faith, he was able to commit himself to God. I'm sorry. Let me try this all over again. I told you I can't talk. Why did Daniel have that kind of faith? Let me give you 4 reasons why Daniel had that kind of faith. 1, because he purposed in his heart he wouldn't be defiled by this world. He prayed 3 times a day. He spent time in the presence of the living God, always. He knew the scriptures. We see that by how he quoted the Psalms. And he was engaged with other believers. When it came down to it, when the rubber met the road, he got together with his other 3 friends, and they supported one another in prayer. And God came and answered them. Well, next week we'll get to look at what the actual dream was and what it means. We'll get to and see what God does in response to that. So the worship team can come forward. I don't know about you, but I just so want to be like Daniel, not because I want to be great, but I want to have that confidence, the reality that as I go through just everyday life, God is with me. He'll give me direction, he'll give me guidance, and he'll give me what I need to be able to accomplish the things he wants to do through me. See, because this is the thing, even though Daniel and his 4 friends were kind of special, God had a special purpose for them, he has a special purpose for every one of us. Do you realize that? There's not a single one of us that God can't use and doesn't want to use. It's just, are we willing to let him do it? Are we willing to commit ourselves to him? Are we willing to seek after him with all of our heart? Do we love him with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength? If we do, he will come through and he will meet us and he will use our lives. And it'll be a glorious, wonderful thing.